separate between the approach and the area of concern for the Sufis and the approach and the area of concerns for the Fuqaha. How does he do this? The paragraph after that, Imam Al-Ghazali gives an example, a hypothetical example. When a person is born and then he moves on to the age of puberty, then he becomes morally responsible, and then he's required to say al-shahada, he's required to perform salah, he's required to give zakah if he has the necessary condition, if he acquired the necessary condition, he has to perform as-sawm, fasting, he might be required as well to perform al-hajj, and in each kind of these circumstances, these events that take place in his life, he's required to understand what he's doing. And then he's also, every single individual faces different kinds of spiritual obstacles and spiritual challenges. Sometimes the person has an obstacle of vanity, ujb, has an obstacle of arrogance. He feels that he's higher than everybody else, deals with people using kibr, for example. Another time, the person is suffering from hopelessness, okay? Yet, another time, the person is required to have tawakkul and depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another time, the person is faced with hardships and difficulties, so he's required to be patient. Imam Al-Ghazali is saying that, why do jurists, why do you separate the mandatory, when you say mandatory knowledge, why do you believe that knowing how to pray is mandatory, but knowing how to be patient is not? Why do you believe knowing how to fast is mandatory, but knowing how to be away from vanity and knowing how to be sincere and knowing how to be patient, why do you believe that these are not mandatory? Aren't these circumstances that face the individual? You say that vanity is a sin, and then stealing is a sin. So the person needs to understand what is correct and valid commercial acts are, and yet not required to understand how to abstain from vanity. Aren't both of them their sins? Both of them the person might experience throughout his life. So why do you guys view this as mandatory, yet these notions are not? Why do you speak of these as under fiqh? Because fiqh would mean also understanding. Why do you view fiqh as the understanding of the religion, yet you put patience and tawakkul and zuhd and wara' and i'timad and Allah and tawassul and all these things, you put them aside as, only spiritual electives. Aren't these mandatory as well? This is his question. By giving, how does he present this? Giving an example. And he's like reminding them, look, we are now trying to understand, guys, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. Acquiring knowledge is a must. He said, forget about all the disciplines. Forget about all the academic subjects. Forget about all the courses and books that you guys have. Think. When the Prophet ﷺ said, there is a knowledge that is acquired, that is required by every Muslim. With the knowledge of being how to be patient, did he mean this or no? The knowledge of having tawakkul and depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did he mean this? Would this fall under the hadith or no? If yes, then why are you confining the words to fiqh? Why are you confining the words to ilm al-kalam? Why are you doing that? Then if we come to agree, Imam Al-Ghazali talking to the scholars, if we come to agree that this is the correct understanding of the hadith, then the Prophet ﷺ did not mean religious sciences. Then when he said طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ, seeking knowledge, he did not mean seeking academic understanding of the different aspects of the religion. He meant that a Muslim is required to do certain practices and to believe in certain beliefs. And in order to do that, he is necessitated to understand how to do them, to comprehend how to act before one acts. Imam al-Bukhari radiallahu ta'ala anhu, in the book of Al-Ilm, he says, Al-Ilmu qabla al-qawli wal-amal. Knowledge is before sayings and before actions. When Imam al-Bukhari radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, Al-Ilmu qabla al-qawli wal-amal, does he mean science? Because if we say that the hadith means science, and the words of Imam Bukhari would mean science, then all of you would not be able to practice your religion until you become scientists, until you become scholars. Then every single individual must buy books and go to teachers and learn through academic discourse. But this is not true. People acquire their religion from their parents, from families, from households, from nurseries and elementary schools, before they reach the age of puberty, before they move to junior high, or once they enter junior high. There is no academic understanding of it. Then what they need to acquire is the know-how of the religion, not from an academic perspective, but rather from a practical understanding. He goes from page 24 to 25 to 26, he's iterating the same example. He gives different circumstances, different events, like we find in page 26. Then he said, when, however, the months of pilgrimage begin, it will not be necessary for the person to start at once to learn how to make the pilgrimage. And since it is performed at leisure, learning how to do it is not immediately obligatory. And then, so he goes on iterating the example, giving different situations where the person is being put in, and then the person would think, or he's brainstorming with the jurists, the required understanding in every single situation. And then he moves on to this idea of, as to prohibitions, things that are prohibited, things that are mamnu'at, mahdurat, muharramat, things that are illegal, unlawful. How do individuals abstain from them? Then they need to understand what they are. Whether they have to do with actions, like, for example, wearing silk garments for men, or actions and beliefs of the heart. And these involve beliefs, as he's saying on page 27. Or other sins of the heart as well. Like, for example, he says on page 28, he says, if, however, man, yes, the 11th line, or line number 10, if, page 28, says, if, however, man does not, for most part, refrain from the impulses of evil, hypocrisy, and envy, you should seek to acquire whatever knowledge he may feel he needs from the quarter on the destructive matters of life. How can he neglect this obligation when the Apostle of God ﷺ said, 3 things in life are destructive: sordid avarice, vehement passion, and self-conceit, and no man can refrain from these. The rest of what we shall mention of the reprehensible conditions of the heart, such as pride, conceit, all follow from these 3 aforementioned destructive matters of life. Their eradication is fardhu ayn. A person is required to be away from pride and conceit and so on. Their eradication is fardu ayn, is obligatory. It is, however, not possible. It's not possible that the person prohibits himself or abstains from these, except through a knowledge of the nature of these destructive matters of life, as well as their causes, symptoms, and cure. As he who knows not evil falls into it. The person who does not know evil will fall into evil. And he concludes on page 29 this part of this section by saying, finally, it should become clear that what the Prophet ﷺ meant by his words, seeking knowledge is an ordinance obligatory upon every Muslim, is knowledge with a definite article, namely the knowledge of only those works which are well known to be obligatory upon every Muslim. The line of this reasoning would become apparent, as would also the time in which these obligations should be discharged. God, however, knows best. In other words, he said, finally, whatever the Prophet ﷺ meant by the hadith that is mandatory by every Muslim, this is what makes it mandatory, regardless if it falls under which type of discipline. In other words, that the Muslim, the individual Muslim, who's not a scholar, not a student of knowledge, should not be concerned whether this particular information is being academically studied and examined in certain fields. This should not be the concern of the individual Muslim, but rather to understand it, to abstain from it, or to practice it if it's something that is required. Then he moves on to this idea of that he said, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. Then he moves on to the idea of فريضة, or obligatory on the society, فرض كفاية. In this regard, he starts talking about sciences and saying there are sciences that are related to the Sharia, and there are sciences that are not. What he calls غير شرعية. غير شرعية does not mean not related to Sharia, but rather perhaps prohibited by the Sharia. Actually, this غير شرعية would involve both the sciences that are not required by the Sharia and those that are prohibited by the Sharia. غير شرعية would mean this or that. Not required, but it's permissible. Or prohibited, impermissible. On one hand, and the sacred sciences, the sciences of the Sharia. And he divides the al-ulum غير الشرعية, he divides them into three different types. علوم غير شرعية, they are not religious sciences. These non-religious sciences are either praiseworthy, they're not religious, but they are being praised by the Sharia, or blameworthy, they should be prohibited and abstained from, or they're permissible. The Sharia does not require them, does not necessarily praise them, but at the same time does not prohibit them. And then he defines, he says, sciences whose knowledge is deemed fardu kifaya comprise every sciences which are indispensable for the welfare of this world, such as medicine, which is necessary for the life of the body, arithmetic for daily transactions and the division of legacies and inheritances, as well as others besides. These are the sciences which, because of their absence, a community would be reduced to narrow straits. So whatever guarantees the continuation of civilization, whatever guarantees the welfare of society and community. These sciences he considers to be praiseworthy, and he considers them also to be fardu kifaya. That there should be Muslims who understand math, there should be Muslims who understand medicine, and so on. He actually says no one should be astonished when we say that medicine as well as arithmetic are of the sciences which are fardu kifaya. Because see, the jurists back then saw that usul al-fiqh is fardu kifaya, and ilm al-hadith is fardu kifaya, and ilm al-tafsir is fardu kifaya. So Imam Al-Ghazali is saying, and also medicine is fardu kifaya, and also math is fardu kifaya. And then he moves on to the sciences that are blameworthy, and he mentions things like magic, trickery, and then he says something really interesting. See, on page 31, this is where it comes really interesting, where he says, the sacred sciences, 31, the sacred sciences which are intended in this study are all praiseworthy. And then he says, sometime, however, they may be confused with what may be taken for praiseworthy, but in fact are blameworthy. For this reason, sacred sciences, sacred sciences, al-ulum al-shar'iyyah, are divided into praiseworthy and blameworthy sciences. He's saying al-ulum al-shar'iyyah, and perhaps Sheikh Azam could get this. I'll get you the Arabic. See, he says, وأما العلوم الشرعية وهي المقصودة بالبيان فهي محمودة كلها ولكن قد يلتبس بها ما يظن أنها شرعية وتكون مذمومة فتنقسم أي العلوم الشرعية إلى المحمودة والمذمومة. So religious sciences, he's saying religious sciences, the sacred sciences, are sometimes involve what is blameworthy. So they would turn into blameworthy sciences. In order for him to distinguish what is praiseworthy and blameworthy, he says praiseworthy sciences comprise usul al-fiqh, for example, the branches, al-furu', and then the auxiliary, which is the muqaddimat, the introductions, and then the mutammimat, supplementary. So he says there are 4 kinds of al-ulum al-shar'iyyah. And he gives examples for those. He says that usul, actually, he says usul are the sciences of al-kitab, the Quran, the science of ilm al-hadith, the science of al-ijma'. But see, would you agree on this translation? Is he talking about sciences, or is he talking about knowledge again? So he says, first come the sources, usul, which are 4 in number: the Book of God, the usage, or the tradition, the sunnah of his Prophet ﷺ, the agreement, ijma', or consensus, and the traditions relating to the companions, athar al-sahaba. Are these sciences, or are these knowledge, information? Knowledge. So again, when he says here, we should correct ourselves. When he says al-ulum al-shar'iyyah, he does not mean religious sciences, perhaps. He would rather mean religious knowledge. That part of it evolved into religious sciences. And then he says, second are the branches, al-furu', that are drawn or deducted from al-usul. And then the muqaddimat, the introductions, he said these are the instruments of understanding the sciences, the sacred sciences, sacred knowledge, which is the linguistic sciences and language and syntax. And then al-mutammimat, on the last paragraph on page 32, he talks about some additional areas of knowledge that are related to usul al-fiqh and usul al-hadith, al-nasikh wal-mansukh, and so on. He said, these then, on page 33, are the sacred sciences. He said, not only are they all praiseworthy, but they also belong to the category of the Fardul Kifaya. I want you here to note something, and this is perhaps the last thing, or before last. Because there is a part where Imam Al-Ghazali says that al-fiqh, he believes that al-fiqh is considered to be a secular science. And what he means by a secular science is ilm min ulum ad-dunya. Secular, he means by secular, that al-fiqh is not related to al-akhirah, but rather related to ad-dunya. And he says that on page 33, where these then are the sacred sciences, not only are they praiseworthy, but they also belong to the category of Fardul Kifaya. But should one inquire, saying, one person could ask me, say, why have you appended jurisprudence to secular sciences and grouped jurisprudence, jurists, among secular scholars? So Imam Al-Ghazali answers back. He says, let me tell you that God made Adam from earth and his offspring from clay, and then he moves on to this again, hypothetical example, until he reaches where he says, it is the jurist, he said, the translator used the word jurisprudent, it is the jurist, though, who has the knowledge of the rules of government and the methods of mediation between the people whenever, because of their breed, they contend. He thus becomes the teacher of the magistrates and their guide in government and control, that through their righteousness the affairs of men in this world may be set in order. Upon my life, I declare that jurisprudence is also connected with religion, not directly but indirectly, through the affairs of this world, because this world is the preparation for the hereafter, and there is no religion without it. Furthermore, the state and the religion are twins. Religion is the foundation, while the state is the guard. That which has no foundation will certainly crumble, and that which has no guard is lost. What Imam Al-Ghazali is saying here, pretty much, that fiqh is law, the legal system. The Muslim legal system is fiqh. Okay? So any kind of government, any kind of state, any kind of nation must have governance, executive order, and at the same time must have some kind of legal system. So he's saying that religion needs both. Religion needs a state, and religion also needs a legal system. The state offers the necessary service for the welfare of individuals to live, because humans live in societies, and states should offer the welfare for these societies, okay, to exist. For people to exist, they need ijtima'. So they need a society, and society requires order, and order comes from governance, and governance comes from that there is some kind of leadership. Okay? This is on one hand. So in this sense, religion needs the state. And in the other sense, the state needs a legal system upon which it uses to govern the people. And this legal system in Islam, it helps the state to govern on one hand, and it helps the people to move in the direction of the hereafter, to the day of judgment. Because it's a legal system that has a moral, spiritual dimension. The legal system in Islam, which is fiqh, views that al-ghaya, the moral end of actions, are rewards, hasanat, or sins, sayyat. So it's not a legal system that is merely for this dunya, but rather it's a legal system that addresses a spiritual meaning. So the fiqh in Islam helps to act this dual role. On one hand, it's a legal system for the governors, and on the other hand, it's a moral code. And this is why in today's world, people are, and this is perhaps an idea that Wa'il Hallaq talks about in his book, The Impossible State. Because when we talk about, is there something called Islamic governance? Is there something called Islamic nation, Muslim nation? The contention comes from where is the root of the problem? That fiqh is sometimes viewed as a legal system, a legal code for the people in leadership and government to lead the peoples, the Muslim peoples, or is it a moral code for individuals, or is it both? And if it's both, what are the dynamics of each side? This is something for you guys to think about. But mainly Imam Al-Ghazali understands this difference. And actually, Wa'il Hallaq quotes Imam Al-Ghazali in that book. Okay, so again, Imam Al-Ghazali sees fiqh as a secular science. For this reason. And he gives a dalil. So he says, thus it is well known that it is not possible to carry out the pilgrimage without the protection of an escort of Bedouins along the route. But the pilgrimage itself is one thing. Setting out on the road to pilgrimage is another. Policing the route without which it is not possible to perform the pilgrimage is still another. The knowledge of the matter of policing the route with all its rules and regulations is again another. See, if you want to perform Hajj, there are the rituals of the Hajj. This is one thing. Preparing for Hajj is another. Securing the road and the transportation is another issue. Knowing how to do all of that is a different notion. And then he goes to say, the result of jurisprudence is knowledge of the methods of government and control. This is attested by a tradition whose chain of authorities goes back to the Prophet ﷺ. Namely, he says the hadith, people will not be judged except by three. A governor, a deputy, and an intruder. Mutakallif or mutakallif. The governor is the imam. The deputy is his lieutenant. While anyone else is an intruder who undertakes the responsibility without there being any need for him to do so. As a matter of fact, it was the custom of the companions to avoid giving legal opinions to the extent that each was in the habit of referring the question to his colleague, although they did not avoid answering questions relative to the science of the Quran and the path of the hereafter. Imam Al-Ghazali says that when the companions are asked about the meanings of certain verses, they would answer the questions. When they're asked about what brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what gets us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would answer. When they're being asked about the Day of Judgment, they would answer these questions. But when they're asked to give a verdict, a fatwa, they would abstain. And he is noting this. Why we never there? Perhaps any of you could have, could find this. Did you ever find a companion asked about the meaning and would say, "La adri"? Would abstain out of wara in that. You don't find this. But you find when they are asked about halal and haram, you would get all hesitant to address these notions because of this hadith. Because this hadith says what? Those who give legal opinions, religious verdicts, legal rulings, either the imam or someone appointed by an imam. Anybody else is what? Is an intruder. So they were afraid to be intruders. So Imam Al-Ghazali is saying that they did not do this out of their spiritual understanding that this is a very serious matter to give a religious ruling, but also in order to keep order in a society, you should not have two dual legal systems. And this is something that perhaps we are now suffering in the Muslim world. There is a legal system and there are people who are giving fatwa. And those who are giving fatwa, some of them are appointed and some of them are not appointed. So people get perplexed. Are we supposed to take the view of the legal system? Are we supposed to take the view of Darul Ifta? Any kind of Darul Ifta, not necessarily the Egyptian one. Or are we supposed to believe in what scholars who study fiqh on their own, or in institutions? Should we take their own view? Which one? My Shaykh, or Darul Ifta, or the legal system? Which one of those? The Sahaba did not abstain from giving religious rulings because it's a serious matter only. This was one reason. But the other, they wanted to keep the legal system intact. We are not appointed by the Khalifa. We don't have a position to do that. So they do it very sensibly when they give religious verdicts. They do it sensibly. Now, whenever you find anybody has some kind of religious appearance, people ask him a question. Is this halal or haram? Only because he's wearing qamis or jalabiya, or he has a beard, or has a prayer mark in his forehead, or holding a sibha or something. They go, is this halal or haram? This is not only wrong in accordance to knowledge. You don't know if that person is knowledgeable or not. This is not only haram because you are creating a hostile situation, because this person is then challenged. Should he stop and abstain or speak his ignorance out? And then the third problem, this is a legal matter, so you're creating a parallel path to whatever the society is going through. And then he says, if you agree to this, the same will hold true in the connection with the rules of invalidating testimonies, restrictive ordinances, and so on. He's saying, if you believe that this is true in the acts of worship, then therefore the acts of transactions and so on, like commercial transactions, the rulings of commercial transactions, and the legal punishments perhaps, and so on, this is obvious. in legal punishment. So if it's obvious in worship and rituals, it's more apparent when it comes to commercial transactions and legal matters concerning punishments and what is lawful and what's not, when it comes to contracts and so on. He states the problem that I talked to you guys about after that in page 35, says, concerning Islam, the jurisprudent discourses on what renders it sound or unsound, as well as on its conditions, but only pays attention to the outward confession. The heart, however, is removed from his domain, because the apostle set apart from the jurisprudent those who yield the sword and those in whose hand the reins of temporal power lie. Lie meaning held. What he is talking about here is that he's giving an example here. He says, this the apostle did when he said to the man who had killed another because the latter had recited the confession of faith, giving for a reason of his fear of the sword. Have you examined his heart? The Prophet ﷺ said that. So the jurisprudent also determines with the aid of the sword the soundness of one's Islam, although he knows that the sword can neither reveal to him the intentions of the individual, nor remove from his heart the veil of ignorance and bewilderment. He is, however, counselor to him who wields the sword, since the sword can reach the individual's neck, and the hand his possession, and the hand his possessions. Repeating the confession of faith with the tongue protects his life and the possessions as long as he has either in this world. The translation here is a little bit needs to be retranslated. What Imam Al-Ghazali is saying in this part, he's saying that the faqih is studying the outer confession. See, the sword, he's saying that the sword perhaps in the outer reality played a role in having that person become a Muslim. And the faqih, even though he sees that the sword could have played a role, that power could have played a role in having a person become a Muslim or not, even though the faqih only deals with the outer idea, that if he says La ilaha illallah, he's a Muslim. And he's not concerned about the intentions. He's not concerned if the person is doing this to, to fly away from the situation. He says the faqih is only related to the outer parts. For this reason, Imam Al-Ghazali sees the faqih as a person related to al-dunya, to what we see here. But what is related to al-akhirah is something else. Imam Al-Ghazali keeps on the following, with the same idea when it comes to prayer, when it comes to almsgiving, when it comes to different areas of rituals. And then he moves on to talk about different levels of piety. And I'll ask you, he mentions 4 levels of piety in between his argument, and I'll ask you to go through them on your own, and if you have questions, then you bring it up next time. He also mentions the difference between fiqh and medicine, because he's saying that people, when I say that fiqh is secular and medicine is secular, they think that I'm saying that fiqh is on the same level of medicine. But he's saying, of course, fiqh is more closer to al-akhirah than medicine is. And he gives 3 reasons on that. He says, jurisprudence fiqh is superior to medicine on 3 counts. First, it is sacred knowledge, unlike medicine, sacred knowledge, because fiqh is coming from the religion. And then he says that it's superior to medicine because no one of those who are treading the road to the hereafter can do without it. In other words, anybody who wants to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wants to take the path of the hereafter, in some sense, he is also required to practice correctly. So in this sense, the person needs Sufism for the problems of the heart and the spiritual aspects of the journey, but at the same time, there are legal aspects of his practice to make certain rituals valid or invalid. So in this sense, fiqh becomes as a complementary area with Sufism. And then the third reason why fiqh is superior to medicine, he says, because jurisprudence is akin to the science of the road of the hereafter, which I just mentioned. They go together. Okay. And then he also talks about the sciences of the saints, and then talks a little bit about al-ulum al-mukashafat. And then he talks about the second part, this page 42, the science of practical religion. He says, is the science of the states of the heart, of which the praiseworthy are fortitude, gratitude, fear, hope, resignation, devotion, piety, contentment, generosity, recognition of one's obligation to God under all circumstances, charity, good faith, morality, fellowship, truthfulness, sincerity. He says, to know the truth concerning these states, as well as their definitions and the means whereby they are attained, together with their fruits and signs, and tending whatever states has been weakened until it becomes strong again, and whatever has disappeared until it reappears, belongs to the science of the hereafter. Again, this should be the knowledge of the hereafter, not the science. And then what he calls blameworthy knowledge. He says, on the other hand, the blameworthy knowledge, such as the fear of poverty, discontent with one's lot, bitterness, rancor, envy, deceit, ambition, he means false ambition, the desire to be praised, the passion to live long in this life for the sake of indulgence, pride, hypocrisy, anger, scorn, enmity, hatred, greed, lust, extravagance, and so on, exalting the rich, despising the poor. And then he moves on to conceit, being diverted from attending one's own fault. All of these he's giving examples of blameworthy knowledge. He says the opposite of these immoralities, namely the praiseworthy traits and the fountainhead of all good works. The opposite of these, which are the praiseworthy traits, are the fountain of all good works. Now note something. To know the definitions of these traits, the truth concerning each, the means whereby they are attained, as well as their fruits and cures, comprise the science of the hereafter, whose acquisition, according to the legal opinion of the learned men of that science, is fardhu. Whoever should turn away from this knowledge would, in the hereafter, be destroyed by the wrath of the King of Kings, just as he who would fail to perform civil duties would, according to the legal opinion of the jurisprudence of the world. Imam Al-Ghazali is trying to come about to say this. The blameworthy knowledge is thinking or believing that the understanding of fiqh would get you to the hereafter on its own. This would be a blameworthy knowledge. If you think that if you know the conditions of prayer, the conditions and the rules of purification, the conditions and the rules of almsgiving, the conditions and the rules of zakah, but you have no understanding whatsoever of what piety is, of what hypocrisy is, of what envy is, how these are obtained and how those are abstained from, what are the signs of each, what are the fruits of each, how do I keep practicing, how do I develop the habits of these things? If you have no idea about these things, and yet you believe that fiqh only would get you somewhere, this becomes a blameworthy knowledge of the Sharia. Because you have ruled out the road to the hereafter. And you believe that only the legal rulings are enough. we need to finish up. Okay, I tried to push it as much as possible. I guess we'd have to finish this particular section next time as well. Well, I tried because again we have 7 sections and we are supposed to finish the remainder. See, we have 5 remaining lectures, and we have 5.5 remaining sections. Okay, so in one section we have to make it quicker than the other. So we would be continuing the rest of this particular section next time. If you have any questions, concerns, I need to just give you logistics hints about certain logistics. I apologize. One of them is that the approximate start time of the lecture is 5:40. So pretty much somewhere between 5:30 and 6. So if you want to give yourself a deadline to be here is 5:30, 5:40. Usually, if I am here before 5:40, I would not start until 5:40 comes. Okay? If I'm here before 5:40, then most probably I'll start at 5:45 or something. Okay? Today we started at 6. I know the lecture is a bit long, and I apologize for this. I know I see that I could go on, but I see that most of you are sleeping. But because we are under certain circumstances, traditionally, the Muslim tradition in learning is that there should not be long gaps between lessons. So a lesson would be perhaps an hour long, but it would be daily or day after day. But we have these lessons by a week. See, if you divide this 2 hours and 15 minutes for the whole week, then see how many portions you will get each day. You'll be getting like 15 minutes or something, or perhaps half an hour a day of Imam Al-Ghazali. So that's why I apologize. This is traditionally is not correct to go for a long time. Or perhaps this conclusion is not really accurate. Sometimes we would go in the Muslim tradition for more than that. But I guess in the modern context, 2 hours are too long. But again, I try as much as possible to condense. We have a deadline. From previous experiences, alhamdulillah, we have been sticking to whatever deadlines we have been putting to finish the courses. So I apologize again.
Or you can decrease the number of lectures.
Decrease, increase, then it will go on for a longer period of time. 8 weeks is more than enough for a course. So people after 2 months, they're done with the course. If you make it longer, then it will be 3 months and 4 months. By experiences, people after 2 months, after 8 weeks, they stop coming. Again, traditionally, it should have been 3-4 times per week for 2 weeks, for example. Then we're done. So you come here in 8 times in 2 weeks, and you're finished with the book. But because of circumstances that are beyond my own choice, people come once a week. If you guys come once a week and we make it for an hour, for example, or an hour and a half, then this is like a pace of a turtle pace. We all make it through 2-3 pages maximum. This particular book could be taught as a college reading. And again, that's why I ask you guys, if you come prepared and you read the book before you come, and I find that you guys ask questions, that will make it much faster for me. But I find myself that I have to cover every single notion that Imam Al-Ghazali has mentioned. And that would necessitate more time. If you do your part, your responsibility, that you read at home, even if you just skim through it and jot down a few notions, and when we come the next time, it will be much faster because you already grasp some things by your own reading. And also practice some mutala'a, some reading skills as well. you should also help me out, because certain parts of the translation are a little bit crooked, kind of. Okay, if you could turn this off, just take attendance and we're done. Any questions?